The Stilt Walker. In the winter of 1891, the logging camp of Pine Ridge stood at the edge of the great northern forest. 40 men worked there, cutting timber from dawn until dusk, their axes ringing through the silent woods, until the disappearances began. The first to vanish was young Robert Hayes. He had gone to check the traps one morning and never returned. The men searched for 2 days but found nothing except his rifle, lying in the snow, and strange tracks nearby. The tracks were like nothing they had ever seen. They were deep and narrow, pressed into the earth by something thin and tall. The stride between each print was 12 feet or more. No animal walked like that. No man could. 3 nights later, it took another. James Chen was sleeping in his bunk when the screaming started. The men rushed outside with lanterns and rifles, but they were too late. The door to the bunkhouse had been torn open. The wood splintered as though gripped by something with terrible strength. The camp foreman, Douglas Pike, refused to abandon the camp. They had a contract. The men would set watches at night, stay armed, but they would not leave. They organized watch rotations, 2 men awake at all times, rifles loaded, staying close to the fires. For 5 nights, nothing happened. The men began to relax. On the 6th night, it came for Michael Brennan. Michael was on watch with Samuel Cross when it happened. Samuel had turned away for only a moment. When he looked back, Michael was gone. And standing at the edge of the firelight was something that made Samuel's blood turn to ice. It stood 9 feet tall, balanced on legs so thin they seemed impossible, like stilts made of flesh and bone. Its body was grotesquely fat, hanging with folds of loose, pale skin that swayed as it moved. Its arms were asymmetrical. The right arm was thick with muscle, ending in a normal hand, but the left arm was long and thin, hanging nearly to the ground, with only 2 curved claws, each as long as a knife. Its head was barely there at all, just a small lump on top of its body. But below that, taking up most of its torso, was a mouth. A massive, lipless mouth that opened and closed slowly, like a wound breathing. Samuel fired his rifle. The creature jerked backward, then walked away into the darkness, its thin legs carrying it with impossible speed. The next morning, the men found Michael's body. Chunks of flesh had been torn away, but there was no blood around the wounds. The edges were burned, dissolved, as though by acid. Half the men left that day. The others stayed, and Douglas Pike organized hunting parties. They followed the tracks deep into the forest to a cave surrounded by bones. So many bones. The men camped near the cave, planning to enter at dawn. But the creature came that night. It moved among them with horrifying speed, its asymmetrical body jerking and swaying. Its massive mouth opened wide, and from within came a sound that made the men's minds feel wrong. They fired wildly. Some bullets struck the creature, but it did not slow. It grabbed Douglas Pike and lifted him into the air. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and a stream of clear liquid sprayed onto his chest. His screams filled the forest as the acid burned through his flesh. The creature tore a chunk from his shoulder and swallowed, then threw his body aside. The remaining men ran. Only 3 made it back to camp. Only 2 survived the night. Thomas Garrett and Samuel Cross reached the nearest town 2 days later, half frozen and mad with fear. Most people dismissed the story. A month later, a military expedition found the camp abandoned and the buildings torn apart. They found hundreds of bones in the cave, but not the creature. The official report stated the camp had been abandoned due to harsh weather, but the disappearances continued. 1 or 2 people every few months, always in the deep forest, always at night, and always the same marks: flesh torn away, wounds burned with acid, and those deep, narrow tracks. 10 years passed. Thomas Garrett drank himself into an early grave. muttering about the stilt walker until he died. Samuel Cross became obsessed. He studied the creature, collected reports, mapped the disappearances. And slowly he realized something terrible. The pattern formed a wide circle, as though the creature was not hunting. It was patrolling, guarding something. In 1901, Samuel returned to Pine Ridge alone. Near the collapsed cave, he found a wooden sign, old and weathered. Northern Timber Company. Excavation site. 1873. Abandoned. He dug into the cave entrance and found a tunnel leading down. He descended with a torch. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Carved into the walls were ancient symbols and writing, predating any civilization Samuel knew. In the center stood a stone pedestal, empty now, with markings that looked like warnings. Samuel understood then. The logging company in 1873 had dug too deep. They had found this chamber and released something that had been imprisoned for centuries. The stilt walker was not a forest creature. It was a guardian, something created to protect this place. When the seal was broken, the guardian remained, its purpose corrupted. Now it simply killed anything that came near. But there was something worse. According to the symbols on the wall, there had not been one guardian. There had been 12. Samuel left the chamber with shaking hands. Somewhere out there were 11 more of those things. He burned his notebooks that night and never spoke of what he had found. Samuel Cross died in 1943. Before he died, he warned his grandson to stay out of the deep forests, all of them, everywhere in the world, because humanity had woken them up. In the years since, sightings have been reported from forests across the world. Different continents, different climates, always the same description. 9 feet tall, thin legs like stilts, asymmetrical arms, and a massive mouth. The loggers of 1873 did not just release one guardian, they released the knowledge of where the other 11 slept. And slowly, as humanity expanded into wilder places, we have been waking them, one by one. There are places in the forests where people do not go anymore, where entire regions have been quietly evacuated, where the governments know something walks on thin legs in the darkness, something that cannot be killed, only avoided. And if you ever find yourself in the deep woods and you see tracks in the earth, deep, narrow tracks, impossibly far apart, do not investigate. Run and pray it has already fed.